We'll just give it a few more minutes for people to join, so we can see they're still joining. All right, I think since we're on a tight time schedule, we only have an hour. I think I'm going to go ahead and start the event. And as people join, we'll be letting them in, and the event is live on Facebook. So we'll have the recording of the event after the event as well. But good afternoon, dear ladies, members of AmCham, but also members of our Women in Leadership group. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this first Women in Leadership event of the year. It is, of course, a pity that we couldn't hold it in person like we always do. We have this amazing Women in Leadership lunches and dinners, and I'm sure that later this year we'll be able to do it again. I really look forward to it. But meanwhile, we always try to find a positive side, a silver lining, right, to any situation. And I think that the silver lining of this situation is that we can have access and engage speakers outside of Estonia and invite such amazing female leaders like Carmen, who is here with us today, to talk to us without even being physically here. I think you're in Austria right now, right, Carmen? So you're joining us from Austria, and it's great to have you here with us in Tallinn as sun is shining. Kathleen, our moderator, is sitting right now in Helsinki. So as you can see, we have some participants joining from Lithuania and Latvia. So it's great to be able to be here in this virtual, I guess, format today. I would like to mention that this is a new format we're trying this time. And it was actually the idea of our great Women in Leadership program leader and board member, Megan Riley. She's with us here on the call. So we are trying this out as a fireside chat format. And we plan to have a series of such events throughout the year. So thank you, Megan, for a great idea. And we are having this first one with Carmen Ene, the CEO of 3-Step IT and BNP Paribas 3-Step IT. And the discussion will be moderated by Kathleen Nagley, who is the head of the International School of Helsinki. But before I introduce Kathleen, I would like to thank our 3 premium partners who support our AmCham Women in Leadership program throughout the last years. It's Datel, Coca-Cola, and UPS. Thank you so much for your loyal support of the program, because without you, we wouldn't be able to have so many wonderful events. Huge thank you to you guys. And now, without any further ado, as we have limited time, I would like to turn it over to Kathleen Nagley, who is the head of the International School of Helsinki, and is also an educational advisor, executive coach, and keynote speaker. She serves as the chair of the Central and Eastern European School Association and is a commissioner for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Kathleen is not only a passionate leader and promotes leadership, diversity, and well-being, but she's also a long-standing member of AmCham Estonia. She used to be our vice president for many years, served on many committees, and now that she's in Helsinki, she's still keeping Estonia close to her heart. So thank you so much, Kathleen, for taking this task today and moderating the rest of the event. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Daria. And I want to thank AmCham Estonia for this forum. And I think, Daria, maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is somewhere around a decade we've been doing this. And the history of this group is to have interviews and meetings and lunch over the years with all those who ended up being the movers and shakers of society in Estonia who are women. We can recall meetings with President Kaljulaid and Prime Minister Kallas. We've had great leadership from Kadi Vusalep and Crystal Krustuk, Carolee Hendricks, Marina Kaljurand, all the people who, when we think of women in Estonia, they've all been in this forum and they've all been part of what we've been doing. And today having Carmen Enna with it is adding to that illustrious list of female leaders to this group's forum. And I'm going to be challenging you today to be thinking about how we move forward with pushing the Estonian government towards different types of reforms, maybe in the upcoming years. So let me introduce Carmen Enna. As it was mentioned by Daria, she's the current CEO of BNP Paribas and Three Step IT. She's had a very interesting career where much of her career is working with IBM and in many different positions of importance with IBM. She represents really one of the few women leaders in an IT field who's gone all the way up through the ladder of success and is now standing at a place where she is having greater influence on the scene. So welcome, Carmen. And one of the things we've been talking about together is we had a great conversation about kind of your personal history of starting in Romania and where you got to now. Can you take us back to that time in the maybe the mid 80s and bring us up to how you've gotten to where you are now?
So first of all, Kathleen and Daria, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be with you. So the 80s, I think, when I think at the 80s, you can imagine the country I come from, Romania, was probably one of the most severe, restrictive communist regime in those years. So it was the Ceausescu regime. So it's probably, thinking back right now, I can't even imagine that such a regime existed not that long ago in Central Europe. So I was a student, obviously rebellious. So when choosing what to study, I chose cybernetics and informatics. I chose that for many reasons. First of all, because cybernetics was in those days the buzzword of the day, in the same way like artificial intelligence, machine learning are the buzzwords today. But on top of that, cybernetics have one of the founders of cybernetics, which was not really known in those days, was a Romanian called Dodo Blăja. And he was not very loved by the regime, put under house arrest. So, you know, when you're young and you want to change the world, what do? You look at the industry or science that has the chance to revolutionize the world, like cybernetic was. And on top of that, you look to go against a regime that you completely dislike. So doing something and studying something that the regime didn't like too much was obviously something for me to do. On top of that, Romania, like other most of the communist countries, education was very strong in sciences. It was not very strong in humanistics, but even many years after the collapse of the regime, if you look even in IBM, where I worked so many years, a lot of scientists, a lot of data scientists, IT, mathematicians came from Eastern European countries. So this is what I really remember of these days.
I think it's interesting that when we spoke about this, that there was a time in these countries of the former Soviet regions, really, that women were encouraged back then to be mathematicians and scientists, and that is still, that era of women has still played out in these communities. Is this what you saw as well?
I think there were a couple of things here, so which I didn't pay attention in those days, but they made me reflect when I went out in the Western world. So first of all, in the communist countries, from the outset, men and women had to work because that was impossible to keep a family going if not both of members of the families were working. So as opposed to other countries that were more prosperous in those days, where men was bringing the bread at home and women raised the children, in my country, this was not possible. It was quite an egalitarian system because you had Ceausescu, the father of the nation, and Elena Ceausescu, the mother of the nation. So she was also an academician, and she was in, even though the titles we suspect were not real titles, but from the top on, there was an equality between men and women. And I was raised, first of all, in the family, but also in the society, not even to think that I'm not equal with the boys. And not, of course, there were preferences, and probably even in those days, girls would go probably try humanistic things and boys more engineering type of things. But by no means was any idea even that there would be some biases or some gender differences in the way I was raised. But again, I think it also starts very much with the family and how the family raises you, and then how the society looks at this as well.
Well, I think that brings us up to today in Estonia. And looking at Estonia today, if we look at women who are in the IT specialty category, we're looking at women's representation is around 19% in Estonia, and Finland is not much better, which is considered a more forward country possibly in these regards, around 21%. Looking at these numbers, what I fear is that there's going to be another giant gender gap that's going to happen because so many of the emerging fields are in IT, AI, machine learning, and it doesn't have the sexiness that you once felt with cybernetics years ago. And how are we going to, how do you see this playing out already maybe in some of the companies that you've been working with? Is this something that you see as well?
I see, obviously, if you would have asked me some years ago, probably my answer would be different. And more I advance in my career, I change perspectives. And I think this applies to all of us. There are more women overall, not only in my country, now going to university and going maybe to technical university than there were before. I think at the entrance level, probably you see more women than when I started, and I was always, without exception, the only woman in the room. However, you lose them somewhere. So I think many get in, they get disillusions in one way or the other. And when you get and go higher at the top and you look around, you're still alone, or there are very few that manage to get to a certain level. But I think even today, still everything starts with the education, mathematics, IT, coding. These are not appealing for girls. They are not. And I have a personal confession. I started coding. So I coded the first 2 years before getting in on the commercial and business side in IT. And I think one of the reasons is not necessarily that girls are scared that they don't have intellectual capacity to code or to learn mathematics, But one of the things that I found was that coding for me was really boring.
Yes.
So you see, we women are generally more creative. They look for something more creative than a kind of a repetitive, precise type of operations. So I think here the education, it starts with the family, encouraging girls that they don't have to do only music and art and humanistic, but they can also do math. But it starts also with the education system. And how do we teach girls mathematics? How do we teach girls IT? So how do we give them, how do we present them in a way that they are attractive? And quite frankly, with what's happening now with the pandemic, with the numbers that you quoted for Estonia,
Yes.
that should be the time where women should really do IT jobs, because they are needed, because a lot of in the next year is going to be all about digitalization, and you can code from home, right? So if it's intellectually, it should be a very, very attractive part or job for women to be in. It is how we get them there and how we create the interest to get them there, I think.
You mentioned a bit about the pandemic, and we've seen worldwide that women, there was a note from the World Economic Forum that they've been scarred by the pandemic. We've lost many women in the workforce, and some of the gains that we saw in the last 3-4 years have been wiped away on the planet because women again were put into traditional roles of taking care of children during lockdowns and distance learning for children. Is this something you've seen as well, that women, you mentioned that we lose women along the way. Have you seen this as well, that there was a loss of female workers during this time?
Yeah, so obviously this period hit women more than other people, and obviously it hit industries like hospitality and tourism, where generally speaking more women are work on. But I have a personal example with someone in my company that basically broke my heart. An extremely talented woman, incredible woman, smart, young, energetic, with a lot of drive. She was doing fantastic. 2 little kids. The husband lost his job. Then they have to move back to their country of origin, and she had to give up the job. So of course there is a personal family situation, but it broke my heart. But it's a concrete example that I have seen in our company, where a woman has to give up her career that was going like that, a job that she liked, a job where she excelled, to be able to take care of the children. So there are many situations, I'm sure, like that. Unfortunately, I have the feeling that this pandemic, instead of helping us progress, is basically taking us back at least a couple of years, I would say.
In the 2021 World Economic Forum report, it said it would take 257 years for women to catch up based on what's currently happening around the world. That was a bit disheartening. And they were looking at gender equity and which countries were leading this, who were doing better than others. And some of the top 5 are no surprise: Iceland, Finland, Norway, New Zealand, and Sweden. So the Nordics have been leading for over a century on these topics. The first voting allowed for women started in Norway, for example. But what was really interesting to me was who rounded out the next 3: Namibia, Rwanda, and Lithuania. Where does Estonia rank in that? Number 46. And Romania was 88. So, looking at these numbers, my question and thinking at the moment is, what happened in places like Lithuania, which one of our Baltic neighbors, that they were able to move so quickly? What changes happened there? And I think Rwanda is a very interesting case study for Estonia to think about, because what happened in Rwanda was that a crisis, the crisis of the genocide of the 1994, precipitated the entry of women because so many men were murdered, lost their lives in the genocide. And strangely enough, it was a dictator that had made a policy that 30% of parliament had to be women, and there was a huge encouragement of women to enter into all fields of the workplace. Today, Rwanda has the highest rate of women in parliament of any country in the world, over 2/3. But here's the strange part about Rwanda, which makes me think about Estonia. Social norms of female behavior has not progressed. So there was a talk about one woman who was a member of parliament whose husband insisted that she shined his shoes each day before she went off to parliament. So do you think that the changes that we're looking at, to have big systematic changes, that was precipitated from a government top-down initiative, and since then they've made incredible strides. Is that what we're missing? Are we missing the pressure on governments in other parts of the world?
I think so. First of all, that's a very interesting story, Kathleen. I was not aware of that, but I just hope that we don't need another genocide.
No, me too. But I'm thinking maybe the crisis is the pandemic.
That women have a chance in this world. I think we can make our way, hopefully, in a more peaceful way. But two things that come to my mind when you give this example to me. One is about the prejudices, the societies that we are living in. And let's not forget that these are prejudices that exist for thousands of years. So for many thousands of years, the society has been built and the businesses has been built by the men, for the men, and run by the men. So those prejudices, I think, and biases are probably one of the most difficult things to change. And I can give an example here. And here I believe, when I mentioned that everything starts in the family, in this pandemic, how many girls are helping moms at home? And how many boys do that? How much harm we might do ourselves? And what I'm thinking is, my son was bullied at school because when he was little, he was saying, I was a single mom many years, and he was washing the dishes. And in Austria in those days, a boy washing the dishes for his mom was not a cool thing to do. He didn't care because he was educated not to care and continue to do. But I think some of the biases, even without thinking, we continue ourselves in the way we raise our children, in the way we raise the boys and the girls. And these stay. The other part of it is quotas. Because this is basically you were raised. So they put quotas and they put targets. And this also, during my life, I changed a little bit my perception. When I was young, I thought quotas are extremely offensive for women. I did not want it to be a quota. I thought, and I had such a conviction that I'm good, I'm strong, I deserve a place at the table because I have something to bring to the table, and I'm going to make it. Mm-hmm. I don't need quota. Everybody will recognize how good I am, how strong I am, and they will give me a place at the table. But when I started to get older and advance and see, like I was telling you, that the higher I get, the more lonely I am, in terms of ladies colleagues. I honestly, I reconsidered my opinion about the quotas and the targets. And I strongly believe that these are very important. And I think last year, the European Union announced that they are going to reconsider decisions and recommendations they did years ago, for example, for women on boards. And I know you mentioned the Nordics. I know, for example, that in Norway, companies that don't have minimum 40% women on boards could be delisted from the stock exchange.
Yeah.
So in the end, I believe it's like in business. You want to reach a certain growth, you put yourself a target. And when you want to achieve a certain thing, you have to put yourself. I don't know. I don't like the word quota. You can change the word in any way you want. If it's a target, or if it's a ambition, or if it's whatever it should be. I strongly believe that those things are pushing society into a certain direction.
Yeah, and I think that's, an interesting point. And the direction that the EU is going, I think, is first accountability for companies. So there was in March that there was some early stages of a proposal that companies would be required to at least report what the numbers were in gender pay gap, for example, so that just having an accountability piece to see that, oh, I'm going to submit this to in Estonia, Statistics Estonia, for example, and I realize that I have a 46% pay gap or something between men and women. So I think that accountability and data study by small and medium sized companies, not just the big corporates who are often putting pressure to do this with their diversity and inclusion programs, is super important for a place like Estonia. Currently in Estonia still has the worst gender pay gap in all of Europe. The best is Romania, and a very small difference, less than 3% in Romania, which is so interesting because the gender gap of just like access to society and power is quite low in Romania, but there's parity when it comes to pay. In Estonia, it's around 22% the difference. And I've been in these forums with women for 10 years, and we're still saying this over and over again, that Estonia has this terrible issue. It's spoken about on International Women's Day and then quickly forgotten by the government. What do you see as the type of pressures? You mentioned quotas as being a type of pressure. Do you see other types of policy kind of pressures we can be putting on a government like Estonia?
Well, Estonia is quite, if I compare, if I read, and if I speak to my domain, because it is about tech, it's very advanced in many ways. It's the most digital advanced. So most of the government services are digitalized. And then I think going forward, it's the need will be more and more to digitalize. So, and if I look at the, because I just browse a little bit, there were last year at least 9,000 jobs gap on IT in Estonia. Yes. So there is a big place to be filled by women in these jobs, which again I think would be perfect jobs, especially now with the hybrid working and everything, to be filled by women. And again, here I believe both companies and the governments can put measurement in place to make sure that women are given the chance, the proper chance, not a spreadsheet chance, to get to these women. And apart from putting targets and quotas, I think what my experience is you also have to look a little bit more into a granularity to see where are these women? Are they at which level? Because if I talk, you have a target, right? And then you will see a lot of women that are in HR, in communication, in some administrative jobs. So my view is we need to go from the big target into more granularity and understand exactly where are these women and how the number is being made, and get into every field and make sure that in that specific field you have the right target and the right hiring process to start with. Because governments could also legislate in terms of, you know, how we hire and the process and everything else. And everything starts with the hiring. How do you hire people and how do you retain people and not let people go, and how you pay people and you know, how you differentiate between a male candidate and a woman candidate that do the same job. I had in my first job outside my country many years ago, and I believe things didn't change too much, but the people don't talk anymore because they become political. So they think it, but they don't say it. But years ago, when I had my first job outside my country, I was told, and there was discrimination, not only women. I don't know how many in this group have had experience outside the country. When I left Romania, I discovered that it's not only that I'm discriminating as a woman, I'm discriminated as an East European. And then you're a woman.
I know there's a lot of shaking heads in this room for that one.
Right? And my first job, when I asked my rights, was saying, hey, but you can't possibly have the same salary like a Swiss or an Austrian. So I said, okay, but are you really paying my passport, or are you paying what I can do or I can bring at the job? Probably nobody will tell you this today, because today people became more political. There is this political correctness and everything like that. But I'm very sure a lot of people still think that. So there are various layers of prejudice that you have to encounter when you get into these jobs. And the last but not the least is when you see a woman, another prejudice is she can't possibly know math and she can't possibly know IT. That is not what you think. You know, it's embedded somewhere, and some people are thinking of it even without realizing that the brain is wired in a way to think like that when they see a woman.
And I think some excellent points you make, and some of the unconscious barriers there's a lot of women that we've seen that enter into tech and then leave because of the climate of especially small companies that are dominated by, you know, a bunch of young IT tech guys. And in, you know, Estonia, most of the companies are SMEs, and it's an interesting area to explore. Are there other barriers here? Overall, in emerging fields, again, looking at the gender gap, if we look at not just Estonia, but those fields that are emerging that are most powerful in terms of pay in the future in IT, it's in cloud computing, engineering, and AI. And women represent in cloud computing 12% only, engineering 15%, and AI only 26%. So the most powerful careers in IT that they could be heading towards, we already see that best case scenario, there's still 25% of women in the field. So I think what you're speaking to is that there's so many possibilities for women, but we're not funneling women into what can be powerful careers for their future.
No, and you're right, and this is why what I believe is that it starts with the education system. How do you make math attractive? How do you make girls not to be scared of math? How do you make girls not to be scared of coding or of computers? And it's very, very important. What I did in IBM and we do now in 3-Step IT, we bring we were doing girl camps for coding, and this could be organized you know, it can be together with the government and commercial companies. In Finland, we have now 12 high school people that come and do some software application and work on some software application with us. And we prepare them and we try to get them earlier and raise a little bit of interest in these things. So there is a lot to be done here. AI is very, very interesting for women if someone would explain what it really means. And we start to raise and start to educate them in a way that it's attractive and not boring and not something to be afraid of. And again, we have a center in Estonia, so our back office center for 3-Step IT is in Estonia. And what I'm thinking now in going in the future and increasing growing our company, my intention would be to bring more and more activities in Estonia, because it is a digital country, and because I would hope that I will find a lot of women interested to work in these centers. So it's from home. How do we raise our girls, and how do we tell them, you know, you don't only have to stay to cook with me, but mathematics and games are also interesting, even though also games were mainly created for boys and not so many games for girls. And this is also something that is oriented to male. Continue in school, and Kathleen, you know better than anyone else how big a role educators are playing in here. And then government and companies making sure they create the environment, like you were saying, these mature environments where women don't feel welcome. They resist 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and they simply give up because they want to be in a nice environment where they feel appreciated, rewarded, and welcome.
Yeah, and you know, looking into some of the things you've spoken about, what's really interesting about Estonia as well, that Estonia in the last round of PISA testing, which is like, you know, the national testing that happens around the world, Estonia was #1 in Europe, and the girls wholeheartedly outperformed the boys in every subject area. And actually, this is a worldwide trend. Women outperform boys in every subject area in the world today. They also have higher rates of earning master's degrees. And Estonia has some of the highest rates of degrees by women in any country in the world. So it's a super highly educated workforce. But yet we see these pieces. One of the things I would challenge this audience in thinking about what comes next, and if you're speaking about the education piece, 20 some years ago in Estonia, they began what was known as the Tiger Leap program, where businesses and schools got together and said that we wanted, in the Ministry of Education, and that we were going to digitalize Estonia and become a leader in digital services and digital, you know, connection. They took this huge risk and invested, you know, a very large percentage of the annual budget towards this and towards, you know, and looking back now, of course, it's like they had computers in every classroom and everyone was wired properly, and the way they wired the whole nation. My challenge to this group is, why aren't we still screaming or having a louder voice about this gender pay gap this gender gap of IT in the most digital country Estonia wants to be. Where is the Tiger Leap program for women, starting with young women, adding retraining of women, finding ways to funnel women into these programs in universities? This is missing, and I would challenge AmCham Estonia, which has great influence on the Estonian government, to start thinking about what are the next steps to influence that kind of leap. And I would argue that the name of this leap goes back to Estonian history. Lydia Koidula, a very famous writer, poet, the founder of Estonian theater in the mid-19th century. She was a trailblazer in Estonia. And on the Estonian money, before they went to the EU, she was on, I forget which note it was, maybe someone in the audience remembers. But I always thought it was so incredible that a country celebrated a female poet on their money. And it's time for Lydia's leap now, I think. If Estonia is going to be competitive, they have to close this gap. 75% of all jobs are in IT. What are we waiting for? We got to get women in all age ranges into science, technology, engineering, creative arts, and mathematics. Like, this is the only way it's ever going to solve, the next years in Estonian history. If they don't act now, we're going to see this worldwide. The gender gap is going to expand because women didn't enter these fields. I'm going to stop my little speech here now.
One thing I could add.
Go ahead, Carmen.
You could get some business incubator for women that want to set up their own businesses. Because let's face it, a lot of women set up their businesses because they didn't feel well in the office in a male environment. I strongly believe that women can be entrepreneurs if they are encouraged and mentored and supported. And this is also one thing I would like to challenge this the AmCham to lobby the government to give, if it's such a Silicon Valley of Europe, why don't we have a special program for women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, and there is some things the women have organized amongst themselves. I know there's like some VC women groups and some others. We have some very famous women who have certain companies, but they're the exception to the rule, unfortunately. And so you always, these same 3 or 4 women that we point to over and over again. I'm going to open up to questions now, and we can please enter into the chat if you have questions or raise your hand. And maybe Marlene and Daria can help. If you raise a hand, if I can't see you, they can see you maybe. And you can turn off your mic and join in this discussion.
I could maybe start, Nele, from here from Coca-Cola. So thank you. It was such an inspirational and discussion, and I was nodding on many cases because I totally agree on what has been said. And I have few remarks. I don't have question at the moment.
Okay.
Many things and topics, but what a coincidence! Next week we will have Minister of IT Andres Sutt with AmCham, and we will have a short meeting. Definitely worth noting that educational part for women and incubator, Carmen, as you said. Then another point, Coca-Cola is supporting Businesswoman Federation in Estonia with Women Empowerment Program. We have been talking, I think, for 3 years about gender equality, gender gap. We are collaborating through that program with Startup Estonia, all this tech and educating women that tech skills you shouldn't be afraid of. And as you rightly said, majority of students that go into IT college in Estonia, majority are women. Very little graduate, and very little get the tech jobs. And I think that Kathleen, you pointed very rightly, we are small, medium enterprises. And I think this daily gender competition that these women have to take on their workplaces on a daily basis, this is what, sorry for my French, but we get fed up. Yeah, you don't need to kind of reconfirm how good you are. And this, I think this daily battle kind of takes them out of these excellent jobs with excellent skills that they have actually. But we definitely, we will drive for this incubator, tech woman in incubator. And I think we have to have these classes in the schools already in the middle grade, so that people and women and girls understand what's the logic, why this AI. It's not only like, mathematics, it's a lot about communication. It's a lot about social skills where women excel men.
Exactly.
And a lot of good negotiation skills that we are really on top, and we have an advantage. So I think this needs to be kind of, how to say, dismantled for once, and then put together for them. So this is kind of a bit of a Lego for girls to explain what does their role in tech world for AI means, and all these kind of things. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, but you are exactly on the right point. So when I was saying that a lot of women enter in the beginning and somewhere you lose them, is because they lose patience and they get fed up, like you said. Why do I have to prove myself? And this is the reality. All my life I've been I had to prove myself because I'm a woman. I have to prove myself because I'm an Eastern European. I have to prove myself because my English was not so great like the English had, and all these things. And a lot of women gave up. And I think an education has to be given here from home, but also from the school, why you should never give up and why you can still resist, not be frustrated, but not give up. But the second thing that you mentioned about the pay gap, in my career, and I've been in IT and finance, two very male-dominated industries, both, because people don't understand finance also, so they did mathematics, finance, and IT scares people, a lot. So in all my career of 30 years, I never had one woman coming to me asking for a salary raise. Never. I had a lot of men coming to me saying how great they are, how much bonus they deserve, how big car they need to have, and all these things. I never have a woman to come and say, no, I believe my salary should be this one. So this is also something that, and there is an old ask and you will be given. I'm don't belong to any type of religion, but if you don't ask, if you never ask, obviously there are little chances that someone will just come and offer you.
Yes.
So a lot of education, I think, has to run also here. And the other thing is, if a man comes and asks for a salary raise, is normal and he's competitive. If a woman comes and asks for a raise, like I did when I went first to Austria, I was considered nasty and aggressive, and do we really want her around if she's so vindicative? So it's a lot around this topic to be discussed. I agree.
Yeah, and I think what exposes, there's so many layers. This is why it needs some kind of systematic approach to it, that us having these little pockets of trying to help together is not making real progress. When Nella was talking about how many women enter into the IT college and don't finish, it makes me wonder, do we need to think of a more regressive kind of thought where it's like we have an IT college just for women then, that they're supported to get through and to be founders of companies and move forward into their own business. So to me, again, this idea that because the number of barriers has to do with entire society's trends. We need to have initiatives that are attacking this from many different levels, and it's really thought through in a comprehensive approach, saying this is not going to be tolerable. We're going to do all these sorts of things to address this for our future. And again, looking at the people I can see on the call, this has been the history of our women in leadership events. It's almost all women. We'll have 1 or 2 men join us historically, and we need them in the room. Just frankly, they need to be in the room.
And one of the things that I was hoping that, because everybody talks about women and what we should do and how we should lean in and how we should fight.
Yeah, all on us.
And all on us. Nobody talks about men.
Mm-hmm.
But in fairness, some of the best mentors I ever had in my life were men, just because there were no women, in big positions when I was there. And I strongly believe that men have an incredible mission to and they can help a lot. And a lot of them are. A lot of them are. And I think what I used to do when in IBM, I was part of the Women in Leadership. We had our own forum, and we would invite men.
Yes, we do too.
Men, because they can help a lot, And if you look at this Me Too movement, that there were a lot of men that have wives and girls and sisters, and I go and tell them, okay, would you like your sister to be treated like that?
Yeah, Megan.
Yeah, sorry, Carmen. I just want to say, as Nelly said, it's been so great to have you on this call and to hear your thoughts. And actually, as we're discussing, I mean, I'm country manager for a company called Vimo, and prior to that, I worked in Microsoft as director of engineering. So I really feel everything you just said. And what I would really love to hear your thoughts on are from exactly this perspective of how to get the men involved. This notion of allyship. I think this is not a notion we have a lot of discussion around so far in Estonia in the 5.5 years I've been here. And I think it's something that we really need to move forward with some progress. I would love to hear your thoughts on efforts that you have seen within the IT community or in your world in finance that have actually moved the needle from an allyship perspective, so that it's not just women trying to solve this problem, because we all have male managers, male coworkers, men sitting across the table when we're negotiating. So love to hear your thoughts on what has worked from your perspective.
So this is why I believe, and by the way, I talk a lot with men, because when I started to do women conferences, all my bosses were men. So I had to find allies, and I had to work with them. I had great mentors and great men that helped me do things. But you also, you have to be a little bit, I tell you, biases worked also against men. I see situation that when men try to be understandable and empathetic, they are considered to be weak and soft. So it works both ways. The reason I believe men have to be educated and bring on our side, so that, for example, in the hiring process, in the promoting, women need to be given exposure and chances. And normally this is why they stay here, because they are not given exposure and opportunities. I was lucky to have men managers. They gave me a chance to have big projects, to move from country to country, to have various experiences. But I asked for this myself. So when we sold our company to IBM, I asked to go abroad. I asked for an international assignment, but I also had a lot of support from men to get into some project that helped me grow. The other reason why it's so important to get men on your side, when you and me are going to go and say, okay, let's put some targets or ambitions, is one thing. Oh, these women, they are ambitious and they are pushy and they are bossy, whatever. But if a man is going to go and say, I want women in my board, I want, and you know, and we are forgotten. They say, yeah, and after 1 month, everything we say is forgotten. But when a man is saying that, he got a better year, a better, people are probably listening in a different way. So as opposed to us being always the ones, if we get as many allies we get in men, and as many men can help setting rules on how we hire, on how we retain, and how we promote, and how we provide exposure to women, because I think exposure is the most important thing. You have to be given the chance. And most of us, we don't get the chance. And then they have, their word has a different weight than our word.
Yes, unfortunately. You know, what's interesting, AmCham has, you know, all the major corporates in Estonia, and many of them are foreign companies, many American-based. See, to me, I think the allies are there. It's gathering them up. You know, the sponsor of these events themselves can help take that conversation and, you know, uniting the group that AmCham Estonia has now and saying, this you need to take action on. Just like if you look at right now, what's happening in Georgia and the US, you're seeing major corporations saying, I'm going to pull out, I'm not going to be involved in this unless because of this, you know, political pressure over voting rights. Estonia has the right people in the room. AmCham Estonia does too, but they need to be corralled in. And, you know, this often fits with diversity and inclusion goals of so many of these companies, and you give them a good excuse to sign something. So that'd be
also with good business, yes?
Yes,
so,
exactly.
And it goes with good business.
It's the business case has been proven over and over again about diversity and inclusion, and you know, not only this and not only the women of Estonia, but all marginalized communities, LGBTQ, people of color, and others who are in this society. We're running out of time as usual. Daria, do you want to?
Actually, when the discussion is so good, time flies really, really fast. And I also was looking at the clock, and we're already at the end of this 1 hour. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much, Carmen, for taking the time to join us and share your story, but also great messages that we, and Kathleen, thank you so much for calling for action, because we do talk about those things over and over. We have those issues on the table for years. We do need to finally do something about this, and I'm glad that this discussion is happening exactly 1 week before our meeting with the Minister of Entrepreneurship and IT, newly appointed just in February. So we really hope to take it up with him, and Nele is smiling right there because she's the head of our Public Policy Committee. She'll be moderating that discussion, so I'm sure she'll take quite a few messages from here to that meeting. And I think that we'll just need to continue with this great discussions and supporting each other, because what Carmen, you said that it is important when it's difficult to get through that path without any support, and at critical times, you know, we support each other, but also we need to get men involved to support us in our mission as well. So we'll continue with that, and thank you so much for this great hour, and we have the recording for everybody who missed it, so we'll definitely send it out to our male and female members. Everybody will get a chance to watch this, but we hope to see you, Carmen, in Estonia in person very soon.
Well, I certainly want to be there. I wish you a lot of luck, and I'm looking forward to have some good IT ladies in our center there, and thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you, and we'll work on that so you have enough people.
It's time for Lydia's leap. I'm telling you, Lydia's leap. Tell that to the IT minister. This is what we want.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please
Thank
stay
you,
safe
everyone.
and healthy, and see you very soon at the next event.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.